when we look beyond a universal truth.
History is a record of endless liberation struggles, yet the result is almost always the same, a humanity that remains fractured. We fight for freedom, but the divisions only seem to deepen. We usually approach these struggles through isms, Pan-Africanism, Marxism, or rigid religious doctrines. These frameworks require us to adopt a subjective view of the world, often focusing on fragmented experiences rather than a unified reality. When we examine how these ideologies function, they often mirror the structure of a religious establishment. They are frequently employed by ruling elites to manage the perceptions of the masses, creating false hopes and deceptive promises that keep power concentrated at the top. This creates a cycle where the 99% remain at war with one another. As long as we use the subjective tools designed to divide us, the underlying systems of control remain untouched. To see how an institution can manufacture a reality for profit, look at this example. For decades, the cigarette industry marketed smoking as a medicinal aid. By using medical endorsements like this 1946 advertisement, they convinced the public the harm was limited, allowing a multi-million-dollar industry to thrive on preventable illness. Today, we know smoking impacts nearly every organ, exposing the devastating historical deception. A similar shift occurred during the industrial era regarding the concept of white supremacy. Earlier European historians like Herodotus and Leo Africanus had documented the advanced achievements of African civilizations. The narrative of racial hierarchy was a later fabrication, designed as a means to maintain dominance by dividing the global workforce. This ideology didn't just target the marginalized, it victimized the European masses as well. While promised status, they were simultaneously subjected to the same environmental pollution, labor exploitation, and physical deterioration as the people they looked down upon. To dismantle these lethal control mechanisms, we have to move beyond subjective isms and align our lives with an objective, verifiable force. That force is truth. In this context, truth is not a philosophical debate. It is defined as that which can be verified, measured, and observed, functioning more like a scientific method than a belief system. Just as we study gravity or aerodynamics to understand how things move, we can apply truth to study the nature of our reality. It is the accurate perception of things as they actually exist. This connection is visible in our own physiology. In Hebrew, the word for humans is Adam, which shares a root with Adamah, meaning the earth or soil. We can physically verify that human bodies are composed of the same minerals found in the earth: magnesium, iron, and potassium. The Hebrew word emet stems from the root aman, meaning to support or to affirm. If truth is the foundation that supports the universe, then it acts as a sustaining energy for everything built upon it. When we build a society on deception, we are removing that foundation. This lack of support manifests as the systemic aberrations we see today: chronic illness, social division, and the breakdown of biological health. The architecture of the word emet itself reveals why it was considered central to liberation. Emet consists of the letters Aleph, Mem, and Tav. These are the first, the middle, and the last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. By spanning the entire alphabet, the word symbolizes the Alpha and Omega, the entirety of existence. It suggests that truth is found only when we perceive the full, holistic picture, rather than partial, fragmented viewpoints. If we calculate the numerical weight of these letters using gematria, Aleph is 1, Mem is 40, and Tav is 400. Together, they total 441. When you add those digits, 4, 4, and 1, the total reduces to 9. In metaphysics, 9 represents completion and the culmination of a cycle. 9 is mathematically unique. Any number multiplied by 9 results in a sum that reduces back to 9. 9 times 2 is 18, and 1 plus 8 is 9. 9 times 5 is 45, and 4 plus 5 is 9. This mathematical permanence mirrors the nature of objective truth. While institutional narratives can be manipulated or rewritten, the underlying laws of reality remain constant and immune to human bias. If we shift from subjective isms to a worldview centered entirely on this verifiable truth, the structure of our society begins to change. Using truth as a scientific lens allows us to identify deceptive ideologies in real time. We stop reacting to emotional manipulation and start measuring the actual effects of the doctrines we are told to follow. Deceptive systems require the masses to accept false perceptions. The moment we recognize that our divisions are manufactured illusions, the oppressive system loses its influence. Unity becomes possible not because we agree on a new ideology, but because we are all acknowledging the same verifiable reality. When we align our thoughts and actions with objective truth, we are reconnecting our human systems to the natural laws that govern the universe. This shift moves us from a mindset that merely accepts decay to one that affirms life. It suggests a transformation in consciousness, where we prioritize the well-being of the entire web of life over the interests of power. Within the realm of quantum physics, where all outcomes coexist, this raises a boundary-pushing question. If we shift to a life-centric existence rooted in truth, could we transcend what we currently view as the inescapable fate of physical death? Truth is more than a point in an argument. It is the verifiable substrate required to sustain life and achieve the liberation that has eluded us for centuries.
Welcome to the debate. If you were tasked with building an airplane, there is, an inherent expectation of absolute, uncompromising objectivity.
Right. You're not just guessing.
Exactly. You don't construct the wings based on how you feel about gravity or how your specific community has historically interacted with the sky. You rely on the strict, verifiable laws of aerodynamics.
Of course.
But when we transition into the realm of social liberation and human freedom, suddenly that rigorous scientific objectivity it's completely abandoned.
Well, it gets replaced by emotion.
Yes, we rely almost entirely on subjective, emotionally driven ideologies. These fragmented isms that define our struggles. So today, we are evaluating a highly provocative framework presented in the text Comprehending Truth by S.T. Musi and L.K. Musi.
A really fascinating text, by the way.
It really is, and we are zeroing in on a central tension here. The question is, must truth-centrism, which the text defines as an objective, unifying, and root-cause approach to collective liberation, must it fundamentally replace traditional ideologies like Afrocentrism, Marxism, and feminism?
The old standbys, basically.
Right, and I will be arguing that yes, it absolutely must, because those traditional isms, they inherently divide humanity and perpetuate these superficial freedoms.
I hear you, but I will be arguing that while truth-centrism provides a vital objective baseline, which it does, those specific lived experience frameworks, particularly Afrocentrism, remain absolutely indispensable tools. They are needed for addressing the tangible, localized manifestations of oppression. They don't need to be replaced. They just, need to be realigned to reality.
Well, the core issue with liberation struggles based on isms is that they view the world through highly subjective lenses that are practically designed to cater to the human ego.
How so?
Look at the mechanics of it. Marxism filters all of human suffering through the lens of class.
Right.
Feminism filters it through gender. Pan-Africanism or Afrocentrism filters it through race. By isolating these specific variables, these fragmented movements end up pitting human struggles against one another.
But they're addressing real pain points.
Sure, but the overarching oppressive systems actually survive on these divisions. The elites at the top, they don't mind if we fight over class or race, because while humanity goes to war with itself, the overarching structure of deception just remains totally intact.
Okay, but
Take Afrocentrism, for example. When a movement prioritizes its specific cultural identity over absolute reality, it naturally breeds self-deception. It selectively omits uncomfortable facts and creates this blame the white man for everything syndrome.
well, that's a bit of a simplification, don't you think?
But that externalization of blame completely ignores internal limitations and actions that perpetuate the ongoing conditions. Truth-centrism operates entirely differently. It is verifiable, it's measurable, it targets the actual root cause of oppression, which is systemic deception.
Okay, I understand the appeal of that. But that assumes oppression operates as this vague, generalized cloud of untruth that harms everyone equally. And it just doesn't.
It harms humanity as a whole.
Broadly, sure. But oppression manifests as a highly specific, historically localized weapon. I am not discounting the danger of ego, but we have to look closely at a critical concession in the source material itself.
You mean about the nobility of the causes?
Exactly. The author explicitly states they do not advocate for the abolition of Afrocentrism. They actually say these causes are noble and important. Truth-centrism is a phenomenal, unifying metaphysical principle, but it cannot be a standalone replacement for targeted action.
It provides the only clear vision for action, though.
But if a political establishment builds a system of oppression targeted specifically at a race, the response naturally requires a lens that understands the mechanics of that specific racial oppression. I mean, broad concepts of truth must be channeled through specific lenses to achieve practical empowerment.
I disagree with the premise that...
Just to finish the thought, without addressing specific historical contexts, truth-centrism becomes way too abstract to dismantle entrenched, highly organized systems of harm.
I hear that. But, how does an Afrocentric critique specifically solve a spiritual or social problem better than an objective truth framework? Let's look at how ideologies actually function in the real world. Think about modern algorithmic echo chambers.
Oh, sure.
Ideologies manipulate our emotions. They tell us what we want to hear just to maintain our allegiance. The text draws on the Zulu concept of kiniso and the Hebrew root aman.
Right, establishing truth as firm.
Yes, defining truth as something that can be supported, affirmed, and crucially verified physically and spiritually. It is the accurate perception of reality. If an ideology requires the suspension of objective reality to maintain its emotional appeal, like interpreting history as we wish it to be rather than what it actually is, it becomes a form of blind faith.
But who is saying we should interpret it as we wish it to be?
Any movement that prioritizes a cultural narrative over hard facts does exactly that. You can't dismantle a highly organized system of harm using a tool that requires you to lie to yourself.
Well, our listeners are probably thinking, are you asking marginalized people to just give up their specific identities because they contain some emotional bias?
I'm asking them to prioritize objective truth.
But the isms you're critiquing, they didn't invent subjectivity in a vacuum. They were formed as direct survival responses to very specific political deceptions. The text actually calls out political elites who function as a literal religious establishment, creating false realities to maintain power.
Right, the systemic deception.
Yes. So when you are surviving a targeted false reality, focusing on your specific group isn't inherently a rejection of universal truth. It is a localized application of it. It's triage.
But triage is meant to be temporary.
Temporary but necessary.
When triage becomes a permanent identity, that localized application is exactly what traps us in a cycle of what the author calls superficial freedoms. We fight for decades and we end up in the exact same spot, just under a different set of delusions. Because we are fighting the symptoms and not the disease.
The symptoms are what's killing people, though.
But if you claim these movements are built to fight deception, we have to look at the genesis of the system they are fighting. Let's examine the concept of white supremacy as framed in the text.
Okay, let's look at that.
The author argues that white supremacy was not some spontaneous social attitude. It was a tool deliberately manufactured by elites during the industrial era to divide and rule.
Right. To engineer a hierarchical social structure that kept the working class fractured.
Precisely. And look at how it worked. The brilliant insight here isn't just that racism is bad. It's that racism was a highly effective psychological distraction tool.
A wedge issue.
Exactly. The text points out that this system ultimately harmed the European masses as well. While the European working class was given the psychological wage of feeling racially superior, they were simultaneously being poisoned in factories. They were suffering massive economic exploitation, living in horrific environmental conditions.
The illusion of supremacy blinded them.
Yes. The ideology blinded them to their own exploitation. So, if we rely on Afrocentrism, which often frames the struggle as a binary black versus white dynamic, we are just treating a superficial symptom.
I see what you mean, but
We are acting as if white supremacy is the root disease when it is merely a fabricated lie used by elites. Truth-centrism cures the actual disease. It cures the systemic deception that manipulates all of us.
Okay, but even if we accept that premise, that white supremacy is a fabricated lie created by industrial-era elites, its effects are still targeted.
But they stem from the lie.
Sure, the disease might be deception, but if that deception causes a localized injury, you need a specific medical specialty to treat it. Let me give you a mechanical example straight from the text regarding African spirituality.
Go ahead.
The author discusses how some Afrocentrists rightfully critique Western Christianity's detrimental impact on Africa, urging a return to traditional practices.
Right, which makes sense on the surface.
It does. But then we see a really complex dynamic play out. You have practitioners of traditional African spirituality colluding with corrupt Western Christian pastors to promote the prosperity gospel.
Oh, wow, yeah.
A traditional healer provides supernatural backing or credibility to fraudulent practices, essentially helping the pastor scam the congregation. That is a highly specific, culturally localized problem. A broad, universal truth might completely overlook the nuances of a Sangoma colluding with a prosperity preacher. You need the specific ideological lens of Afrocentrism to clean house internally and identify where specific cultural practices have been corrupted.
Wait, no, that situation is the perfect illustration of why truth-centrism is necessary as a replacement for mere cultural allegiance.
How? It's a culturally specific problem.
Think about the structural blindness inherent in your example. If you view the world solely through an Afrocentric lens that dictates anything African is sacred, you cannot condemn the Sangoma. Well, you are structurally forced to defend or overlook the practitioner simply because they represent African tradition. You end up protecting the very corruption that is harming your people.
Not if you're being critical.
But truth-centrism requires us to break free from that emotional attachment. It demands that we evaluate the practitioner not by their cultural origin, but by their alignment with objective, verifiable truth. Are they exploiting people, yes or no? The cultural label is completely irrelevant if the action is deceptive.
Okay, we completely converge on the idea that they must be evaluated by objective truth. Where the divergence lies is the idea that truth-centrism must replace the cultural framework entirely rather than anchor it.
Because the framework itself is compromised.
Potential to be a powerful force when truth takes center stage. Let's use a mechanical metaphor. Truth-centrism is the track, and the specific isms are the trains.
Okay.
You absolutely need the track to ensure you are moving objectively and safely. But you still need the train to carry specific, disenfranchised populations from their unique locations of historical trauma to their destination of empowerment.
I mean, it's a nice metaphor.
Right now, as you pointed out, the train of Afrocentrism is trying to lay its own tracks as it goes, driven entirely by the emotion of the passengers. It derails. But the solution isn't to blow up the train and force everyone to walk. The solution is to put the train on the solid iron tracks of truth.
The flaw in that metaphor is that the trains you are defending were engineered by the very subjective emotional paradigms that the text explicitly warns against. If we rely on Afrocentrism or any other ism, we are still operating a machine that was built to cater to the ego.
I think that's a bit harsh.
But truth-centrism isn't just the track. It's an entirely new paradigm of travel. It requires a departure from the narrow confines of ideology altogether. And the text grounds this deeply in our physical reality, not just abstract philosophy.
You mean the biological arguments?
Yes. Look at the connection between humanity, which in original Hebrew is Adam, and the earth, Adamah. The text points out a verifiable, objective truth. Human beings share the exact same mineral composition as the earth: magnesium, iron, phosphorus, potassium, water.
Right, the elemental makeup?
This is verifiable human physiology. We are deeply interconnected with all life forms at a cellular level. So if we possess a framework that proves our shared physical and metaphysical reality, maintaining these fragmented labels just actively resists that unifying truth.
But you can't just tell a marginalized group, hey, we all share the same magnesium, so let's just unify and forget the historical specifics.
That's not what it's saying.
But it can come across that way. And the author doesn't do that either. The call is for integration. The physical reality of atom and atoma establishes the baseline, sure, but the text takes this into deep metaphysical territory to show how truth encompasses everything, including the specific struggles.
Through the Hebrew language analysis, you mean?
Exactly. Let's break down the Hebrew concept of emet, the word for truth. The text uses gematria, which is an ancient alphanumeric code where letters correspond to numbers.
Right.
The word emet calculates to 441, which reduces to the number 9. In this system, 9 symbolizes completion. Furthermore, the word emet is spelled with the letters aleph, mem, and tav. Those are the first, middle, and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
Right, encompassing everything.
It's a literal structural metaphor demonstrating that truth encompasses all of existence, from beginning to end. It is the alpha and the omega. Because truth is totalizing, it doesn't erase the specific middle experiences of a culture. It provides the structure that gives those experiences meaning without letting them warp into self-deception.
But if truth encompasses everything from beginning to end, then any framework that only looks at a specific slice of history, like, say, the last 500 years of racial dynamics, is fundamentally inadequate for true liberation.
Inadequate on its own, yes.
The text stretches this totalizing nature of truth to its absolute limits, even delving into the quantum physics of physical immortality.
That is a wild section of the book.
It challenges the very necessity of death, framing it as the ultimate deception accepted by humanity. The argument is that by adopting a purely life-centric consciousness, grounded entirely in the objective truth of our interconnected energy, we can overcome even biological degradation.
It's definitely pushing the boundaries.
Now, whether a listener takes that literally or metaphorically, the underlying point is profound. Truth-centrism requires us to challenge every assumption we have about reality, no matter how foundational. You cannot achieve that level of paradigm shift if you are still clinging to the emotional comfort of an ideology designed to make your specific group feel validated.
It challenges every assumption, yes. But validating a group's historical trauma isn't inherently opposed to life-centric consciousness. The problem is when the validation becomes the endpoint.
Which it almost always does.
When Afrocentrism operates without truth, it results in the ego-driven syndrome you described earlier. But when it operates with truth-centrism, it allows a community to critically examine its history, its traditions, and its cultural practices with a discerning eye.
By borrowing from objective reality.
Yes, it allows them to rectify internal errors like the Sangoma colluding with the corrupt pastor we talked about, while still honoring their specific ancestral journey. They are no longer blind to the deception within their own ranks because the uncompromising standard of emet is guiding them.
Well, I mean, that requires a level of cognitive dissonance that most ideological movements frankly cannot sustain.
It requires discipline.
To achieve genuine root-cause liberation, society must fundamentally break free from these subjective paradigms. The historical record is just so clear here. These fragmented isms have trapped humanity in endless cycles of superficial freedom, pitting us against each other while overarching systems of deception thrive.
We definitely agree on the overarching deception.
Right. By fully embracing the unifying, objective, life-giving energy of truth-centrism, we finally address the ultimate enemy, which is that systemic deception. We stop treating the localized symptoms and start curing the disease by interpreting history and reality strictly for what it is, not what our egos wish it to be.
And I maintain that while truth-centrism provides the indispensable, objective foundation required to prevent self-deception, those targeted frameworks remain vital. They are not inherent enemies of truth, nor do they need to be entirely replaced.
Even with their flaws.
They are noble struggles addressing very specific, localized manifestations of oppression. You cannot cure a specific ailment without understanding its specific pathology, and that is exactly what these localized lenses provide when they are guided by the strict, uncompromising light of truth.
Well, I think where we absolutely converge, and where the source material leaves no room for ambiguity at all, is on the necessity of absolute truth as the only antidote to self-deception.
Absolutely.
Whether viewed as a total replacement for old ideologies, or, as you argue, the foundational track they must run on, Truth must be verifiable, observable, and completely free from ideological bias.
The rejection of blind faith in favor of a scientific, verifiable approach to our social and spiritual reality it's a profound takeaway. It requires immense courage to subject your most deeply held cultural beliefs to objective scrutiny.
It really does. When you are engineering the vehicle for human liberation, you just cannot build it on the shaky ground of how you wish the world worked. You have to build it on the firm, verifiable laws of what actually is.
Perfectly said.
So the question remains for each listener. Will you continue to trust the emotional comfort of your ideological vehicle, or are you ready to subject it to the uncompromising physics of truth? Thank you for joining us on The Debate.